Your respected Thai, dear noble community. So, welcome everyone to the week 4 of the Who is Thich Nhat Hanh course. So, we are all asking ourselves this question like a koan. And I feel so grateful to be part of a spiritual community that is practicing to be free from any dogma or ideology, to be free from fear. And every day I actively take refuge in this community, take refuge in the Sangha. And when I do that, I feel stable. I feel like I'm not a separate self. And I can die any moment. It's okay. Because my life has meaning. I also sometimes feel sadness and grief, but I know that they are just emotions, and if I don't feed them, then they pass. And one of the aspects of the Buddha that I felt very deeply or intuited, and that's different from when I first started practicing Buddhism. When I first started, I believed the Buddha doesn't ever have any negative mental formations. He transformed everything. Um, and now I see it differently. I see that the Buddha had those emotions, but he didn't let them invade and take over his mind. He knew how to take care of his grief, take care of his anger. And that is enlightenment. He said, if you know how to suffer, you suffer less. So there's an art of suffering. And when we learn how to take care of that suffering with mindfulness, then wonderful things can happen. New possibilities that we didn't see before. And so I always say that's my favorite practice. It could be I find a new practice that I love even more, but so far I really love just shining the light of mindfulness on my suffering. It's like sometimes it's like a furnace, and there's anger, and there's denial, ignorance. How can that be? How can it be that that happened like that? And I see that emotion, and I say, yes, you are ignorance. I know you. You try to hide yourself. How many of you have seen the Wizard of Oz? I think many of us. So at the end, there's a big Wizard of Oz up on the kind of on the wall, and Dorothy and the Scarecrow and the lion and the Tin Man, they're so terrified of the wizard that they see this giant apparition. But then the dog, Toto, runs and sees a man behind a curtain, and he pulls the curtain open, and you see the man there with a bunch of levers and pulleys and things, and he's somehow projecting this image of himself, which is very frightening, scary. And I always feel it's really, that's the mind. Our mind is always projecting these great demons. And there are real horrible things happening in the world and that are going to happen in the future and that have happened in the past. So, but what do we make of it in our mind? What is it that we make of those injustices, that suffering, that pain? Do we turn it into a great monster and feel overwhelmed with fear? Or do we, like Toto, open the curtain and see that what we've made it out to be is not the real thing. It's just an apparition. And so, and with that insight, I know that I accept that this body is impermanent and that I can lose a limb, I can lose a leg, I can get cancer, whatever. At any moment, we don't know what will happen with our body. But if we live in fear our whole life, what will happen to our body? What will happen to our communities? What will happen to our planet? Then I cannot see that life worth living. And in fact, I find that the more I cultivate non-fear, the more I am able to really help. It doesn't mean that I don't have fear coming up. I remember I was in this hall as a novice and I asked Tai, I was very curious about the practice of non-fear. And I said, Tai, I came on a rattlesnake and it was rattling, coiled up. And I was looking at my fear, being close to that rattlesnake. And I asked, how do we cultivate non-fear? I gave a beautiful answer about our perceptions and how we can stop feeding our perceptions, because we feed our perceptions about the world and how things will happen in the future. And then that waters the emotion of fear. It becomes stronger and bigger. Most emotions, I didn't say this, but most emotions, now we know they pass pretty quickly. Maybe just a minute and a half, 2 minutes maximum. But if we keep feeding it, it continues. And at the end of what I said, stay away from snakes. Because your fear and your pain is telling you something. So it's not to try to this kind of macho or delusional, like working yourself into a state where you don't have any fear. That's just not very intelligent at all. But it's removing the perceptions that feed that fear, so that when fear arises, it doesn't take over your mind. And as we grow and we become more mature, we see that there are many things we'll encounter in our lives that have never been seen before by human beings on this planet. And there's no easy answer. There's no ready-made response. So if we don't know how to take refuge in our own intuition, if we don't know how to go within ourselves to understand the nature of our fear, we won't know how to deal with those new situations. And we'll want to run away, pull the covers over our heads, blot out the world. And I think we all have experienced that as children and maybe as adults as well. So as we continue to look into Thai's life, we see over and over again he faced his fears, very challenging fears. We learn about the defeat of the French by the Viet Minh, which led to, and Dien Bien Phu, which led to the Geneva Accords, Vietnam being, at least on paper, cut in half. Not exactly half, but a north and a south. And hundreds of thousands of refugees moving across the country to one side or the other. Very difficult times. And so when we look at our times, we may have a lot of fear coming up, but we may put ourselves in tight situations where soldiers were shooting at the root temple, leaving bullet holes. Later, we'll, in the 60s, the Thai's life will learn about when someone threw a grenade into Thai's hut and it bounced off the curtain, which was open. Actually, Thai was not in there. So we need to learn to befriend our fear if we really want to go deeply into how we can help this world and offer a positive response to the very challenging situations that we're facing today with increasing wars, political instability. And it says in the 8 realizations of great beings, which is a wonderful text I encourage you to study in our chanting books. Political regimes are subject to fall. And that also means the ones that we like and the ones that we don't like. So we cannot find stability in a government or a ruler. And that is sustained, that taking refuge in the Dhamma, in a political or any other kind of institution has sustained the Sangha. Even sometimes the Sangha has become very small. But because the Dhamma is still there, it grows again. And depending on causes and conditions. And so in this course, as we continue to see Thai's path and how Thai grows in the midst of historical forces which are not separate from Thai, and that become Thai, they become what we think of as the Master Thich Nhat Hanh. We can remember that we are also thrust into that situation where we find ourselves today. And if we learn how to truly take refuge in the Dhamma, we can find solidity, find peace and happiness. And we can actually be effective in making a change. That's what I've learned more and more every day. But I can say that last night I laid there and I said, no, now it's real. Practice isn't just for exercise anymore. Yeah. Because sometimes I thought there was some part of me, it's still like, no, we're just testing this out, see if it works. And okay, suddenly felt like this is not an experiment anymore. This is the real deal. And I was a little bit surprised because I thought that wasn't there, that there wasn't some part of me that was still trying to be the observer, looking on history from a good distance, from a computer screen, on Wikipedia or from yeah, from the comfort of my warm bed covers, reading a book. It's just, you can read it. The story is there. Story that you read, the story of history over and over. But this is history. And how we live this moment, as Tai told us, is a legend. It makes it a legendary moment, the way that we live this moment. And so what's going on here at Deer Park is historical. And we are all part of that history. We are creating uh, a, a good kind of history, a nourishing kind of history, the kind of history that so many future generations will be able to take refuge in. And Tai is also aware of that as you start to notice the way Tai is living, the way Tai is learning. It's a teaching the way Tai learns. And as we look at it now, we just see just like it's like little traces that Tai leaves behind. We feel like we're getting the full story. Brother Phap is going to be comprehensive and tell the whole story of Zen Master Thich Nhat Hanh, but it's not like that. We just have little etchings, little like when you walk by a tree and you leave a little mark as you pass by, and then you try to see, what did that mark mean? What was I feeling at that time? What was the experience like? We cannot know exactly. Even Tai, even ourselves, when we look back in our own lives, how often we just miss 99% or more of the actual lived experience. So if our own memories are like that, then how much more so that of another person? So it's important to remember as we continue, because we are building a kind of narrative, that this narrative is always open. It's not ever closed. And that is also true of the narrative of our lives. Be careful if you've already written the end of your own narrative. Some of us have the end, and if we don't get there, we're not very happy. And even if we get there, we might not be happy either. So we treat Tai with the same respectfulness. That we cannot reduce his path to a narrative. And that is the way in which I'm trying to do teach this class. So we're telling stories together. And those stories can help us to go deeper on our own path.